Hi, my name's Sam, my pronouns are they, them, and welcome to my office. Today, I kind of wanted to do a little bit of a queer fall recommendation. So I'm not going to say that all of these are set in fall, but they are all books that I feel either give me cozy vibes or give me like fall energy, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I've tried to be kind of diverse in the genre area of this, just to give everyone a little bit of a variety. And I am going to include one honorary mention that is not like a queer focus book, but one of the main characters out of like the 6 or 7 main characters is queer. So I'll end with that one. So I'm gonna start with my one big fantasy that gives me kind of fall energy. And it's actually The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. So I read this early this year, and it kind of takes place over a fairly long period of time. Obviously, it's a very big book, but this is about Queen Sabrin the Ninth, and how she must conceive a daughter to protect her realm from destruction, and Eid Durin, who is an outsider. She ultimately performs forbidden magic, and it's ultimately kind of like a high fantasy of the two of them falling in love, kind of opposite worlds, a little bit of opposing sides. I don't remember if it was specifically set in fall, to be honest, but I know that there were certain points where I just wanted to cuddle up with like a blanket around me and a hot cup of coffee and just kind of read for hours on end. I am planning on doing a reread of this fall. I'm gonna take a weekend and fly through it because I feel like that's how I would personally enjoy it more than like the 2 months that I took to read it earlier this year. But I think I gave this like a 4-star or something. I thought that it was a really interesting world. And I thought that the way that the romance kind of appeared out of everything was nice and slow burn. It was interesting. And ultimately, if you like high fantasy where there's lots of magic, there's dragons, there's chaos ensuing everywhere, it's a really good option. And I know that the prequel is coming out next year. This itself is a standalone, which is also really nice. So, Priory of the Orange Tree. If you haven't read it, I think you should. So let's move on. This is my one and only kind of horror recommendation that I'm going to give, and I don't even know how much I want to call it horror, but I'm going to call it horror because I don't know what else to call it. So it's Her Body and Other Parts by Carmen Machado. So this is 8 different stories that are compiled into this, so it is a little bit of I don't know if I want to call it an anthology. It's a bunch of her stories. So, it focuses on themes of like women and the violence that is forced upon them. Look, I would say that it can be gruesome at certain points. When you have 8 stories that are all pretty much focused on violence upon women and queerness and all of that, like, it's not going to be a particularly pleasant read. It's an amazing one, though. It's incredible. It's everything that I could have ever wanted. I don't know if I would call this one my favorite by Carmen Machado. In the Dream House kind of holds that #1 spot, but this was just amazing. Honestly, I just genuinely think that everyone should read it. I would double check before you read it for trigger warnings. I don't remember them well enough to point them out to you, but these are stories about violence upon women, so obviously there are going to be some triggers that you might want to look out for. So my next one is The Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. I know that everyone loves this and everyone has read it, but this, out of all of them, gives me the most fall vibes because it's set in a cemetery. So it's about these two boys. Adriel, he grows up in a Latinx family who have issues with his gender. He is trans and he is a really well-rounded and fleshed out character. And he's trying to prove himself in this family where there are traditional male roles within the cemetery that his family kind of presides over and watches over. And they're really trying hard to assign those female roles onto him, and he's just not having it. And he ends up getting this ghost boy who follows him around, Julian. He is his school's bad boy, and he kind of dies, and they have to go around and figure out what's happening within the cemetery. There are some kind of occultish activities occurring, and it's kind of like a little love story about the two of them. Ultimately, Julian does not want to die. He does not want to go quietly into the afterlife, and the more that him and Yadriel spend time together, the more they become close friends and ultimately become romantic. And they do all of this while also investigating what's going on in the cemetery. So this was just fantastic. I loved every second of it. I thought it was fun. I thought that the timing and pacing of it was perfect. This is definitely like those spooky fall vibes without it being full on spooky. So that one was really great. Next we will do More Than This by Patrick Ness. So this again is not one that takes place in fall. This one I think more takes place in summer, but it is one of my favorite comfy, cozy reads. It's one of the very few kind of sci-fi books that I really genuinely love. I'm pretty sure I've talked about this one before, but it's about these three kids who all die in very specific ways that they hit their heads as they die. And instead of dying, they wake up in the real world. And they figure out that the reality that they've been living in is not the actual reality, what's going on in the world. And that's a big plot point for it, but it's definitely more of a getting to know these three kids and what their stories are, why they died, ultimately, like, what's going on for them. I think that the most interesting thing is to lay witness to what prejudices and what societal expectations are brought into this false reality that everyone's living in, even though they all kind of like packed up and left. Like the way that society has just reordered itself to be pretty much exactly the same, even in this false reality that they created for themselves. So this one was hard to read. One of our main characters is gay. One of our other main characters is a young black teenage girl. And I think our final character, I don't know. But Patrick Ness's writing is just intricate and beautiful, and this book really touches upon topics of homophobia and queerness and parental abuse. So while this does take place in summer, it does give off those vibes of like, you just want to curl up in a blanket and say, oh my god, every time something awful happens, because It's kind of devastating, I will say. So my next one is Freshwater. I have not figured out how to say their name, and I have heard people say their name. Shout out to Books and Bowties for also standing about them with me, because I need someone else to actively and vocally adore them. But it's Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. This is my favorite of their novels still. This is the first one that I read by them. I've read Bitter. I've read, I think it's The Death of Vivek Oji. I've still got a couple more of their books to read, but so far, this one is still my favorite. This is the one that I definitely want to read again and kind of break down a little bit more. This is about Ada. She's born to a southern Nigeria family, and they consider her to have one foot on the other side, even as a child. They just kind of consider her to be odd. And as she starts to grow up, she begins to develop like separate selves. She goes off to college, and she has some traumatic events happen to her, and it's kind of like Ada getting lost in the separate selves that have been forming to protect her, to function with her for all of these different reasons. It's a really intricate story. I think that the way it was narrated was brilliant. It's definitely one that you have to sit down and really kind of take apart. Like, I'm positive that there are a lot of things that I've missed in this novel that I would get on a second read that I didn't get in the first. Because it's this interesting mix of, like, you don't fully understand what's going on, and you don't fully understand, like, who's talking at what times, and it's just an art piece. Honestly, it is a masterpiece. And it's not even that long. Like, it's only like 230 pages, and it's a masterpiece. This is one of the shortest books that I own at this point. I'm just like, how did you pack such a hardcore punch into 230 pages? Personally, I don't know if other people got this vibe from this, but I definitely had the idea of, like, are these in her head, or are these like creatures from the other side kind of coming on and being a part of her after these traumatic events? And can I answer that question for you, like, with 100% clarity at this point? No. So I loved that about it. I love knowing that when I go back to read it, because I ultimately will, I will get even more out of it. So that one takes place during the school year. It takes place over a really long time period, so there's not like a specific season that it's set in. But loved that one. Stan it for the rest of my life. I'll talk about it forever. I don't care. Next, Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. So this is like a historical fiction about two lesbians set in America in 1954. A lot of this takes place in Chinatown. It's about Lily and Kath. And it's these two girls. Lily is from a Chinese American family. She lives in Chinatown. She has a lot of expectations set upon her, and she's a really interesting and well-developed character, and I love her interactions with her family. I also honestly think that a large part of this book takes place in summer. I'm almost positive that a fair portion of this takes place in the summer. So I'm really not doing a good job at picking up queer books set in autumn. But this gives off those cozy vibes still. So they fall in love kind of at this lesbian bar called the Telegraph Club. What makes it feel so cozy is kind of the forbidden love kind of thing, and the way that they work around that, the way that they interact with their families, the obstacles that they have to kind of overcome. You know, all of this, like, it's hard to call this forbidden love, because ultimately it is forbidden love, but it is forbidden love due to homophobia and some really awful things that were going on in the 1950s. It's not like a cute forbidden love, like, I'm rich and, you know, this is like one of my dad's workers or whatever. It's not like that. But the lengths in which they're willing to go to maintain their friendship, to kind of express their love towards each other, and ultimately the ending, you know, it's not an entirely happy ending. It's not like that cute, cozy ending that you might want, but it's a more realistic and more fulfilling ending, I think, that focuses on each of them individually before kind of bringing them back to that unit place. So I think that's what kind of does it for me, is the care that's taken for Lily and Kath as individual characters throughout the novel, and then the way that it is brought together at the end, along with the queer community in this novel, like showing like the brilliance and the closeness of the queer community at this point in time. I just really loved it. I don't know if it's accurate to 1950s or not. I'm really not that well versed in that time era, but I thought that it was a really good romance. I thought that it was a realistic romance, and I thought that it was one that people should read even if you don't particularly love everything about it, because it's definitely one that gets you thinking about queer history and like what it was like at that point, and it just kind of brings you back and away from right now. So I think that it gives me the cozy vibes that I want for fall. So the next one is one that I have talked about in maybe 3 or 4 different videos already, but I will die before I stop talking about this. Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers is still everything to me. Yes, this is fully set in summer. Yes, the main love interest is reminiscent of salt water. Yes! One of the main settings in this is an orange grove in Florida. But I stand by it. Cozy. 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 Read it fall, winter, spring, summer, any season. It'll make it work for you. So, this is about Grace Porter and Yuki Yamamoto. So Grace Porter is a Black woman who has a PhD in astronomy. She has been in academia her entire life. She has excelled at it. She is strong, and she has, I think she's like the only Black student in her program. And after she graduates, she has a job interview for the exact position basically that she has been dreaming of and vying for her entire academic career, and they deny her and give off kind of like some microaggression indications there. So she ultimately has a little bit of a breakdown after that, and she goes to Vegas with her 2 girlfriends, her besties, and she gets married to someone she doesn't even remember. She does not remember Yuki's name. So it's their love story of Grace finding out who Yuki is and dealing with her own expectations on herself and trying to learn how to function in a world where academia is not her main focus anymore. You know, this is ultimately a romance, and it's a very sweet romance, and it's a very well thought out romance, but more than anything, it's a story about Grace learning what to expect from herself, what her values are, in comparison to what everyone else's values are and what they expect of her, and how to function after being like a perfectionist in academia for your entire life. So, Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers is everything. I think it's my favorite book of all time. People don't talk about it enough. I'm going to need everyone to talk about it and read it, because I'm going to read it again this fall for like 4th time in 2 years. It's everything. It's everything. It's just everything that I needed. So we are going to do my final real queer fall recommendation. Before we get to my honorary mention, we'll end with that one. And it is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. So, again, not set in fall, set in winter. So this is about Marin. She goes to college in New York. This is her story about running away from her past in California and touching upon her trauma and working through things and trying to build a life for herself. I've read this quite a few times, honestly. I think I might be on time like 3 or 4. It's a story about grief and relationships and everything kind of hard that happens. So her grandfather dies, and her grandfather is like her person, her other half, kind of. And she's kind of left in this whirlwind state of like, I don't know what to do next. Like, I'm in my formative years and I'm not sure where to go next. She's kind of running away from that grief and that loss, while she also is dealing with kind of like her relationship with her best friend. And it's kind of like an unwinding of the last few weeks where no one really knows what happened, but the story mostly takes place during the winter break, where Marin invites Mabel to come and stay with her over winter break, and kind of deal with their relationship and their friendship and all of the things that have happened since those last few weeks in California before she packed up and left. And it's definitely a story of her finding herself again. So this one is definitely like that sad kind of cozy of, it's truly like a blanket of grief that just wraps itself around you, and it feels wrong to read this in the summer. This definitely feels like a fall and winter read. I don't feel like I could read this in spring or summer and really enjoy it. As you can see on my little tabs. This is another like nice short one. It's one that I feel like I could easily sit down and read all in one sitting and just kind of devour. It's one that I hold kind of near and dear to my heart. I've read it, I think I read it when I was still in high school for the first time, and it really just focuses on relationships with yourself, with others, with grief, with new environments, with old environments, with running away, with handling your emotions. So my one singular one that was like fully set in a winter fall session. Okay, so I am going to do my honorary mention now, because this one is not a queer story in the slightest. But one of the like 6 main characters, I think there are 6, I don't really remember exactly how many, is a lesbian, and I'm pretty sure she's asexual. But it is The Diviners by Bray. This is spooky scary. This is a 4-book series. They're all very chonky. It's like 1920s. There's a cast of different characters, all from different backgrounds with different characteristics. You kind of see comparisons of ones that are fully accepted in society and ones that society kind of leers at, and it's like spooky, scary skeletons. Honestly, that's exactly what it is. There's ghosts, and there's kind of superpowers. The diviners themselves are a group of people who all, I guess I'm going to call them, are genetically modified. They were all part of this like experiment that the United States or whatever did on some mothers to see like what happened if they could create children with different abilities. In this first one, there is a ghost who's haunting a house in New York, and he is like a serial killer, and it unfolds from there. He is not the one and only ghost in this series by any capacity. He is just the beginning. So, 1920s, multiple point of view, many different people, people from varying backgrounds, varying everything. This book is so chunky because she just keeps giving us different characters to see things from, to hear from, to learn about. So, I love this entire series. I really want to do a reread at some point, but it's a very intimidating reread. So, maybe I'll get there one day. That's it for my fall queer recommendations. I think that a lot of the time during fall and winter, I can get really hooked into like high fantasies that I've already read a million times, aka every single Sarah J. Maas book. So yeah, these have been my personal fall queer recommendations. Things that make me feel comfy cozy, or things that make me kind of want to wrap myself in a blanket and not leave my bed. I hope everyone has a fantastic week, and I will see you next time. Bye.